Best of r/malicious compliance episode 80. Subscribe for Reddit videos daily. There's a ton of backstory that goes into this, so I'm going to try to keep that part brief. I'm a woman from the US living in Nicaragua with my Nicaraguan husband. We had a surprise pregnancy soon after we got married and had nowhere to live. At the time, we were living with my in-laws, which was supposed to be temporary before moving to Honduras, where I had been a missionary for a few years. My in-laws generously offered their backyard for us to build a house on and promised to sign it over and make it all legal. Essentially, this would be considered my husband's inheritance. At the time, neither of us realized how toxic they were. Me because I hadn't known them long, and he because he thought he had a normal family. We were too far into the building process when we started to regret it, so we stayed the course and thought things would get better when we were no longer under their roof. Not so much. They still had full access to our house and then felt like we owed them for providing land for them. Here are some quick highlights from the first 2 years of living here before we get to the malicious compliance. My mother-in-law straight up told my husband she wished he had married someone better. Both of them made comments on numerous other occasions attacking me and our marriage. Basically, they think because we follow more US customs rather than Latino ones, I'm a horrible person. My father-in-law owns a taxi business. He regularly made my husband do trips for him without pay. Sometimes after my husband got home from work. So he would work 8+ hours, gone 10 because of a long commute, and then come home and have to drive someone to the airport and was gone another 2+ hours, without getting paid. If my husband refused to work for free, my father-in-law would get mad and we could no longer borrow a vehicle to go to church or their motorcycle for my husband to get to work. Mind you, my father-in-law bought the motorcycle so my husband and my brother-in-law could get around to where they needed to without using the cars or having to take buses. We eventually purchased the bike from them, and 2 days later, my father-in-law insisted upon borrowing it from us, with at least 3 cars in his driveway, even though my husband was about to do our grocery shopping for the week with it. When we had finally saved up enough money to do all the paperwork necessary to get the property in our name, they refused to give it to us because they thought I was going to leave my husband and they didn't want me to get half the property. I was pregnant with our second baby at that point, but they still thought I was going to leave. So, at that point we were severely in debt over building a house that we would never actually own. They didn't relent after a few weeks and we did get it in our names now. But it was the final blow. My husband needed to cut ties with them emotionally because it was so obvious how little they cared about him and their grandchildren just because they didn't like me. They also were abusive to all of their kids, including their surprise baby who's less than a year younger than my daughter. I've seen this poor toddler get smacked around for throwing dirt on the ground and not wanting to leave our house while playing with our daughter. Both of those happened when he was 2 or younger. About a year ago, they decided to get chickens. Why these people needed chickens was beyond me, but we soon had 2 hens, 4 chicks, and a big rooster hanging out on our property. We had the only big dirt patch between the 2 properties and a small garden at that point. The chickens knocked out the garden in a few days, so then we just had a big compost pile that they loved. The rooster was a problem from day one. He kept me up all night with his crowing and I ended up throwing up in the morning because of it. Pregnancy is fun. I told my father-in-law then he had to do something about it. The man laughed at how annoyed I was and told me that's what roosters do. He refused to do anything about it. Fortunately he didn't crow as much after that, and we got a noisy AC unit so we couldn't hear him as much after that. A few months later, the rooster started attacking their son and my daughter. It only happened once to my daughter because I didn't let it anywhere near her after that, but it kept happening to their son because even though he was only 2 and they knew the rooster was aggressive, they let him run around outside unsupervised. Eventually the rooster settled down, but about a month ago now, he pecked my daughter in the face as she approached him while he was eating. He broke skin on her little face. Our newborn baby had been coming outside with me on occasion. I would put her in her little chair and work on stuff in the yard. I couldn't imagine what would have happened if he had decided to go after her for no reason. So I talked to my husband and we gave them an ultimatum. Do whatever you need to do to keep the rooster off of our property or we will kill it next time it crosses the property line. You have 1 week. We even made some suggestions. They could build a fence, tie him at the front of their house, sell him, kill him, literally whatever they needed to do to keep it away from my family. After all, it's their animal and their responsibility. They did exactly what we expected, not a damn thing. When the last day came, I asked my father-in-law if he was going to kill the rooster, and he gave me his usual response of yeah, next week we're going to make it into a soup in a joking tone. So I told him, well, I'm killing it today. He was taken aback and repeated what I'd said back to him in a question. So I said, yes, I'm killing it today, like I told you. I got too busy that day to get out and take care of it, and my husband asked me to hold off until he could talk to them again. So he did, and my father-in-law ended up suggesting we build a wall on the property line. Now, this is something we had wanted to do for a long time. But before that, we didn't have the cash to be completely free of them, and we didn't want to piss them off by cutting them off like that. However, since he was the one that suggested it, we now had the perfect opportunity to build that wall because he couldn't say we were being ungrateful since we were just going along with his idea. So we did. We had our favorite local builder out the next day and the wall was up within a week. We also took out the trees, put a big gate in the outer wall that leads to the street, and bought a car. You see, we'd been saving up for a car and all of this for a while. We didn't quite have what we'd hoped yet, but had enough to jump into maliciously complying. It was amazing how quickly my father-in-law proved that he hadn't actually expected us to build a wall and how much he regretted his words. As soon as the builders started working on it, he started suggesting we put in a door so we still had access to their property. According to my husband, this is how their conversation went. Father-in-law, what if you need to borrow a car? Husband, we're buying our own. Father-in-law, that's a terrible idea. You're moving to the States soon and you'll just end up wasting your money. You'll spend thousands of dollars on a car and won't get any of it back when you leave. Here's the kicker, folks. A few weeks before this, he was desperately trying to get us to go in halves on a car with him, laying out all the reasons we needed this particular car. Because he was going to get something out of it. Now that he wasn't going to get anything out of us owning a car, he didn't want us owning one. So now, the wall is up and we couldn't be happier. My husband hasn't had to do a single unpaid trip for them, and I don't have to deal with my mother-in-law coming over randomly and inviting herself into my home so she can criticize me, my husband, or our marriage. I still hear the rooster crowing and my father-in-law hurling abuse at his family, but it's muffled now so I just smile and thank God for that beautiful 10-foot cinder block structure we put up. And I laugh because all my father-in-law had to do was tie up a rooster and they would still get to use us as much as they wanted. Their loss. Thank you. Next. This is going to be a short one. So about a month ago my mom and dad were eating and my dad asked me to get him some water, so I got up to get some water for my dad and my mom said say yes sir, so I said yes sir, and my mom asked if she could have a glass of water too, so I said yes sir, and we all burst out laughing. Edit. Typo. Thank you. Next. My stepmother complained years ago that I only gave handmade cards for her and my father, saying that I was too cheap to spend money on them. My intention was to show I cared by taking the time to make them something cute and personalized. Since that day, honestly it's been probably around 10 years, I only get her the most obnoxious singing or noise making cards. I collect obnoxious ones throughout the year so that I always have something handy for any occasion. My personal favorite was a card that opened into an entire island with a little hammock hanging between two trees and screamed a loop of ear-splitting island music when open. Our relationship is actually much better now and the practice has moved away from malicious compliance and is now more funny tradition. Thank you. Next. I was oblivious that it was me she was calling out to, or perhaps a subconscious part of my brain from having worked customer service tuned her out. After a few more excuse me being called out, I came to realize everyone in the pool was looking at me. I spin around to see Karen. 5 foot nothing, 90 pounds with a haircut that even the 60s doesn't want back. Fast forward to a little over 15 years ago. I lived in an apartment complex in Portland, Oregon. For a place where it rains 9 months out of the year, the summers can get real hot. I've always been a bit of a water child, so I love to swim. I'm just a happy otter gliding through the water. One hot day, about 105 F, 40, 5C, I decided to head to the pool. Again for description, I was about 5'10", 275 pounds with a stocky build, long hair, long beard, hairy and tattooed. I just threw on a pair of old khaki shorts and some undies and headed into the pool. About 30 minutes into my frolicking, I hear our apartment manager. We'll call her Karen because oh boy was she ever one. Excuse me, she called. I was oblivious that it was me she was calling out to, or perhaps a subconscious part of my brain from having worked customer service tuned her out. After a few more excuse me being called out, I came to realize everyone in the pool was looking at me. I spin around to see Karen. 5 foot nothing, 90 pounds with a haircut that even the 60s doesn't want back. You. She pointed at me in a condescending way I would describe as an annoyed teacher in grade school who just caught you defacing your desk. Me? I asked, pretty sure she meant me but hoping she didn't. Yes you. Why weren't you listening to me? She grunted. Sorry, I have water in my ears, and I'm deaf on this side of my head. I got in a fight in the 3rd grade where a bully punched me repeatedly in the right ear while penning me down. Lost the hearing in it because rather than call my mother or take me to a nurse, my Catholic school decided to make me write sentences decrying violence and fighting. Well now that I have your attention, where is your swimsuit? She asked, as if I was skinny dipping or something. Just to make sure I hadn't inadvertently put on a show and lost my clothes, I looked down to see that indeed my shorts and undies were still in place, and not even sagging. Right here? I phrased more as a question than a statement. That is not a swimsuit. She barked, almost foaming at the mouth and spitting when she said it. I'm not sure what you mean, I stated, genuinely confused. I have clothes on, and everything that needs to be is covered. What's the issue? She stamped her foot like a kid throwing a tantrum and points towards a posted board of rules and regulations. Come here and read, she spat. I climbed out of the pool and walked over to the sign. It read things like no running, no smoking, no drinking, no swimming while sick, no roughhousing, no diving, no lifeguard on duty, no children in the pool unattended, blah blah blah. The line of text that she was pointing to was, swimwear must be worn at all times while in the pool and poolside area. I looked at her and said, I have swimwear on. She could have turned her head around like an owl and I would have been less put off by the way she turned to address me. You do not have swimwear on. Those are shorts. Shorts? You need to wear an actual swimsuit. Or else, she said officially, and deprecatingly. Or else, what? I asked, legitimately curious. There were no posted penalties for violations of the posted rules. You will be fined for every infraction. If you break the rules too many times you and your homophobic slur friends are out. But ma'am, we've been out for years, I said, trying to ease the tension with a little comedy. This isn't a joke. I'll be watching you, Buster. She sneered with a look that would have made Dolores Umbridge offended. So to speed things along, she made good on her promise. Every time I went out in my shorts/undies, she would come out with a little ticket book similar to what cops use and write me up a fine on the spot. $25 fine for violating the swimsuit rule. I think this happened about 2 more times before I got fed up and got an idea. I went out late one night at about 3 in the morning to read the sign. As stated above, the line said, swimwear must be worn at all times while in the pool or poolside area. A light bulb went off in my head, and I got my idea for malicious compliance. My high school used a local swimwear company called Pacific Swimwear to custom make swimsuits of various types. Speedos, the briefs, for men, one-piece leotards for women, bikinis, even thongs. I went in and found that despite being mildly chunky, several leotard swimsuits and thongs in my size. I bought 2 leotards and 2 thongs and put my plan into motion. The very next day, I walk out with a black leotard swimsuit on under my black t-shirt. Once I get into the pool area, I whisk off my shirt, much to the surprise and shock of some of the residents. I frolic around in the water, before I hear something like a rape whistle blowing. We didn't have a lifeguard, so I was very curious. It was Karen, blowing into this whistle like a mad woman and screaming, "What are you wearing? What are you doing?" I folded my arms and said, "A swimsuit." "That is not a swimsuit," she screeched. "Oh, but it is. This is a swimsuit made by Pacific Swimwear. The logo is right here on the chest. They're a local company that, she cuts me off. That's not what I meant. She pouts. Well, the sign doesn't specify whether or not the swimwear has to be appropriate. So, I'm following the rules. If you don't mind, I'm going to get back to swimming now. I do mind. You go inside right now. You go inside and change to appropriate swimwear. Ahaha. Number. I'm going to comply with the posted directives, and nothing else. I'm telling you what to do. She stamped her foot again. No, Karen, I'm not going to be doing that. I don't comply with arbitrary directives as it becomes your word against mine or your word against anyone else's. I'm not going to do what you say just so you can change it on a whim later and then fine me for insubordination. I'm going back to swimming now. If you don't like it, we can sit down and draw up a new lease, which will take a while, and you'll have to change the posted sign. Also, I'm not going to follow any directives that someone scribbles in with a Sharpie, so just putting that out there. I thought Karen was going to literally explode. That, you, why you, that, she stammered, unable to speak due to rage. Bye-bye now. I waved and dunked underwater and swam to the other side of the pool. For about 45 minutes Karen stood trying to get other people on her side, about how some homophobic slur was cross-dressing, corrupting America, being inappropriate, blah blah blah. Most of the people at the pool cussed her out for being a butthole about the swimsuits. Many of them said it was hot and everyone just wants to cool off, and since the apartments weren't air conditioned, people had to do what people had to do. One couple I was friendly with told me that while they appreciated my sexuality and my exploitation of the rule, that maybe I should put something on appropriate for a man to wear. Bingo. I put a towel around my waist after exiting the pool and throw my shirt back on and approach Karen, who had sat in a lounge chair and was using her ticket book to fan herself. Okay, you win, Karen. I'll wear men's swimwear from now on. Thank you. Now just leave. You're banned from the pool for the rest of today. She spat. That's fine, I responded. The very next day, at about the same time, I repeated my ritual, but this time I was wearing a bright neon pink thong. The kind of thongs that some fat dude in a movie would slip into strictly for visual humor. Definitely a men's suit, probably not appropriate for me to wear given I was a bit on the heavy side and built like a bear. I dove into the pool and swam. By now my neighbors, while a little put off by the sight, were laughing because they knew what I was doing and what was about to go down. Like clockwork, out came Karen, out came the whistle and a tirade of profanity-laced homophobia. What is that? That is not a swimsuit, she screeched, actually hopping up and down like a damn toddler. But ma'am, yes it is. I put my hands on my hips. That's underwear. You are done in this pool, mister. Despite their annoyance, now everybody by the pool had rounded on Karen and told her to leave me alone. I stepped out of the pool. If you want to look, the Pacific Swimwear logo is right here on the hip, I said. Gah. I'm so done with this, she exclaimed and pushed her way out of the pool, tossing the ticket book behind her in defeat. Victory was mine. A few months later, when it was too cold to swim, it was time to renew my lease. Highlighted somewhere around page 4 of the tenant rules and responsibilities under the recreation and pool facilities was a rule that stated to the effect of, tenants wishing to participate in the use of the pool facilities must henceforth and throughout the time of their lease be wearing appropriate swimwear for their gender or gender identity. Failure to comply with this provision will result in fines escalating towards eviction with continued offense. And to Karen's credit, she had paid the sign company to put up a brand new sign by the pool that stated the same thing, all at her expense. Well, that's my story. Thanks for the read. TLDR. Tried to swim at my apartment pool in khaki shorts. Got told that I had to wear real swimwear, and was fined every time I didn't comply. Bought some women's one-piece swimsuits and wore them to the pool, then men's thongs just to make my landlord mad. Thank you. Next. Not my story per se, but did just witness it. I work for a large company that has tube-style entrance gates where you must use your pass to tag in/out. Our cards are basically like hotel key cards with our face on them. They're pretty reliable, but evidently they sometimes go wrong and you can't get in. More likely is that you leave it on your desk and have to walk back, which often leaves you trapped in between the lobby and your particular office area as you need to tag into the doors. We also have a security team in the building that will often have one person guarding the lobby. As the gates into the building only admit one at a time, the only way for people without a pass is to be let in by reception/security on the other side of the large reception desks, or be given a temp/visitor pass. It's also possible, but not allowed, to tap a gate multiple times to let other people through. This has the advantage of not having to admit you've forgotten your pass and the faff of having to get a temp one. One of the guards, I guess thanks to not having to wrestle people out very often, can be quite sticky for rules, especially the enforcing of getting a temp pass even if you've left it at your desk, which evidently left a bad taste for some people. Today whilst leaving, this guard is trying to get into the main building through the gates and they're just not letting him through. He's tapping away furiously before giving up. He turns to one of the smokers, we'll call him Paul, who's just buzzed out, and asks him if he can just tap him through. Paul turns to him with a huge grin and an unfrighteningly accurate impression of the guards. I'm afraid I can't do that for you, sir. You see, the policy is very clear on having a validated pass, and if you do not have a working pass you must speak to a receptionist so they can verify your access. You could almost feel the guard die inside. Thank you. Next. I live on a long, hilly rural road. It has a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit and is a no passing zone the entire way. It's illegal, unsafe, and nearly impossible to pass someone, no matter how slowly they're going. Because it's a quiet road and away the town, locals will normally drive 50-55 miles per hour. This was fine, until the police started setting speed traps. Because the road is so hilly, it's easy to accidentally go 55 miles per hour when going downhill. This is how they got me, and a lot of my neighbors. Okay, fine. It is technically speeding. But I'll leave work around the time they start heading back home, so I either see them fly ahead of me at 60 miles per hour or tailgate me the entire way home. It pisses me off, so I started driving the speed limit, exactly the speed limit, 45 miles per hour down the entire stretch of road. When we come to those sharp turns, I go all the way down to the 20 mile per hour suggested speed. Almost every night, a cop gets stuck behind me the entire way, and there's no way for them to pass me. They also can't turn on another road, because all the others are just gravel back roads that lead to farms. My long, hilly road is their only route. It definitely pisses them off. They will turn their brights on and weave around their lane to try and get me to speed up. As soon as I turn onto my driveway, they gun it. I've even had one turn his lights on to make me pull over, only for him to speed past me and drive ahead. It's probably not smart to inconvenience a cop, but what else am I supposed to do? I'm just respecting the speed limit. Thank you. Next. Been enjoying the hell out of this sub, so I thought I'd share a story from my tech support days. Back in 20mumble, I worked as second-level internet support for a Canadian telecom company, not one of the big three. We were responsible for handling trouble tickets that couldn't be resolved by the frontline phone agents, answering technical questions from SAME, and dealing with the occasional "please God fix this right now" from the customer service managers. This particular incident involved a customer who had been complaining the ears off of our entire call center because he felt his internet speeds were not up to snuff. We had looked at his line several times and applied such tweaks to the signal as we felt would help without compromising the stability of the line. After all, there's not much point in improving your line speed from 3 Mbps, megabits per second, to 6 Mbps if you also lose signal every 20 minutes, right? One of the managers just would not take that as our final answer, and one night ended up blasting my colleague on our departmental mailing list for not caring about customer service and hanging the frontline reps out to dry. I guess this particular customer had been blowing up her voicemail, and rather than do her job and due diligence she tried to roll shit uphill. Colleague came to me to confer on the best way to handle this, as we were swing shift and our own managers were unavailable until next morning. The perils of residential support. The two of us pulled up the account history of support tickets, and then pulled up the billing history as well, and found something interesting. Although the line was supporting 3 to 4 Mbps comfortably, and the customer was pushing for 6+, the account plan being charged was for 5 Mbps, a significantly cheaper option. 10 minutes later, we sent that manager a screenshot of the account billing plan and a note that in compliance with the restrictions of the service plan the customer had signed up for, Their internet speed had now been capped at 1.5 Mbps, and pleased to have a lovely evening. Sadly we did not get to hear the next call she made to the customer, but I bet it was a real joy.